I've been working as a truck driver for well over 10 years now, but I only recently changed companies. I actually would have stayed in my own company, but when my friend Jake told me how much his company paid, I practically begged him to get me a job there. He referred me there, and I got the job after a quick interview. The interview itself was very strange because I was asked some questions I didn't expect, like, have you ever abandoned your vehicle on the road? Are you afraid of the dark? Are you religious? Etc. I answered everything truthfully and got hired right on the spot, so I didn't think twice about the oddity of the questions. My job was to transport dried meat products to a small town, and for some reason the company said it could only be done at night and that I had to be there by morning. I'm used to night shifts, and the handsome pay more than compensated for it, so I didn't complain. When the time came for my first tour, Jake explained which route I should take to get to my destination, stating the GPS was off a little. Before I entered the truck, he sent a message to my phone and told me to listen to it when I get on the road, since it explains some basic rules I should follow. I thanked him and started driving. When I got on the old road, which Jake told me to take, I opened the message he sent me and realized it was an audio recording from him. Here's what it said. "Hey, Paul, welcome to the company. Now I know you're an experienced truck driver, but our company has a list of rules you need to strictly follow while you're driving. I'm gonna lay them out for you here, and you make sure to follow them as best you can. I'll also send you a text message so you can read the rules in case you aren't sure. Now, first of all, make sure to turn on your high beams and keep them on at all times since it's really dark on the road. You may notice that even with the lights on, it's really dark, but don't let that concern you. Within the first 10 miles, you may see a dead-end sign ahead. Ignore it and just keep driving. If your lights start flickering by this point, speed up and drive as fast as you can until the flickering stops. You may see an old man hitchhiking by the road at this point. Make sure to stop your vehicle and ask him where he's going. If he says, to the nearest town, let him in. If he says anything else, floor it and don't look back if you do let him in. He will remain quiet for about an hour while you're driving, and then he'll ask you to stop and let him out, despite being in the middle of nowhere. Do what he says, but once he's out, don't look at him while he's walking into the night. You should be well within the 20th mile by now. If you start to hear any banging or growling noises coming from the back of the truck, ignore them. They'll go away faster if you maintain a consistent driving speed, so try to do that. Before you reach the 30th mile, make sure to turn off your radio if it was on until now. Turning it down will not work, so make sure to turn it off. This is really important. By the 35th mile, your radio will suddenly turn on and will be at highest volume. Now, it's really important that you pay attention here. If a song plays, any song, simply turn it down or off. But if you only hear static, stop your truck right away, turn off the engine, lie down on the seat and close your eyes. Try to be as still as possible and keep your eyes closed. You'll hear tapping on the windshield and roof, but you'll be okay as long as you keep your eyes closed. Even if you hear the truck door opening, don't move. Whatever opens them will close them in a few seconds after sniffing around. Once the noises around the truck stop, you can open your eyes slowly and look at your driver's window. If the window is fogged up, wait one more minute. Otherwise, you can sit back up and continue driving. By the 50th mile, you'll start to see something running along your truck on all fours on the side of the road. No matter how fast you go, it will always keep up with your truck. But it's advised you maintain a speed of at least 60 miles per hour. Try to keep your eyes on the road because there's a curve, after which the creature will be gone. If the creature is still following you after the curve, speed up and hope you lose it by the next curve. You only have 3 curves, so make them count. By the 70-mile, your truck will sputter to a halt. Remain as calm as you can and try restarting the engine as fast as you can. Don't look in the rearview mirror at the figures running towards your truck. Just start the engine, and as soon as you do, floor it. You'll notice by mile 80 that it's getting really hot inside the truck. Don't bother with the air condition because it won't work. Try taking off your jacket, but don't open the window under any circumstances. Try not to fall asleep either. Because even though the road goes straight, you may find yourself swerving off a cliff if you close your eyes. If you need to use the bathroom, only do it between the 85th and 90th mile, and make sure to keep your high beams on while you're doing it. Do not step off the road or out of the light. When you're done taking a leak, you may see someone move behind your truck just as you turn around. Don't try following them because you'll just endlessly move around the truck just in time for them to always get behind the next corner, and they want you to stay outside as long as possible. If you hear a high-pitched scream in the distance while you're taking a leak, run back to the truck and floor it. I don't care if you piss your pants, but do not waste a second running back. Regardless of the mileage, at around 3 a.m. your phone will start ringing. Don't answer it, no matter who it is, even me. The caller will try to get you to answer 3 times before sending you a message. Don't open the message either. Again, whoever it's from, ignore it. By the 100th mile, you may see a pair of beams from other vehicles in the distance moving toward you. If you do, turn off your lights immediately and wait for the other truck to pass by. Once it does, you may turn your lights back on. Repeat for any other oncoming vehicles. Do not honk or do anything to attract their attention. Keep looking in the rearview mirror, and if you see the beams of the truck turning around and coming back towards you, drive away as fast as you can, and pray you are faster. Now, when you reach the 120th mile, you'll see a sign for a 20 miles per hour speed limit. Slow down to 20 miles per hour and do not go over that speed, since the sound can attract unwanted attention. You can speed up once you see another sign that tells you the speed limit stops at that point. At around mile 130, you may see a woman waving and asking for your help. Do not slow down and try not to even look at her. Once she's behind you, look in the rearview mirror. If she's still on the road, you're safe. If she's gone, just look straight and don't even think about looking at the passenger seat, no matter what you see with your peripheral vision. Once you reach 140th Beryl, you're safe. From here, it's a straight shot to your destination. Don't try to turn your truck around at any point while you're on the road, because you'll end up driving until you're out of gas, and if that happens, you're as good as dead. Oh, don't use your GPS until you reach the town either, because it will take you to an old dirt road, which will have you driving in a loop. Once you reach the client's place, the employees will take care of the rest. Let me know if you have any questions. I listened to the message and laughed, thinking Jake simply wants to prank me. That was before my lights started flickering. Story 2. Don't be alarmed if the road feels a few minutes longer every time you drive it. That's because it is. As the road lengthens, new side streets may appear. Do not take these, however alluring. Gas stations may pop up to fill in stretches of empty desert. Be wary of purchasing snack brands from them you have never heard of or that do not exist. Cacti will show up every few miles that weren't there on your last drive. These are just cacti. No need to fear the cacti. If your drive on Route 333 takes more than 30 minutes than the last time, report such fluctuations immediately. Multiple former employees who failed to report such anomalies are still stuck there, still driving. Employee Handbook, Section 7.c. It was about the time I graduated from undergrad, and finally braved checking on the empty void that was my bank account, that I realized three things. Perhaps an English degree hadn't been the smartest choice for replenishing the aforementioned empty void that was my bank account. I could no longer live in student housing. I had utterly no idea what to do with my life. All of those, along with a healthy mix of typical Gen Z stress slash depression slash insert anxiety disorder, here were probably the reasons I responded to the advert in my mailbox for trucking positions along the Pacific coast. I didn't actually expect anything to come of my application, but the company responded immediately and offered to pay for a trip to go out and talk with them. I'd never been to California, so why not? Besides your typical interview questions, the only other thing they had me do was a skill assessment. All you have to do is take a freight truck to the turnaround point and come back. The interviewing manager, Randall, dangled a set of keys in front of me. He seemed like a nice enough guy, if a bit guarded. Not too difficult. You look like a competent boy. Don't I need a commercial driver's license? I'd actually driven the campus shuttle for 2 years during college, but it hadn't been a large enough bus to need a commercial license. I'd made that clear on my application. Do you think you're able to drive a rig of this size? Well, yeah, but... Then don't worry about it, Randall told me. How far is the turnaround? For most, it's 4 hours, but it could be less. That's what we're testing you on. So you want me to speed in a 5-ton vehicle that I don't have a license for? More like 15 tons, and absolutely not. Don't speed. That would taint the results. We want to time how long it takes you naturally. The logic made no sense. Don't speed, but cross your fingers it goes quick. But it didn't matter anymore. The whole situation was sketchy. This was multiple levels of illegal, and federal prison wasn't what I imagined the keynote speaker meant by seize every opportunity in her graduation speech. I was steeling myself to tell all this to Randall and walk straight out of the office when, I forgot to mention, he said, $800 in compensation for your time. 10 minutes later, I was in the cab, turning the key. I noticed another man, similar age to me, sitting in the idling cab of another semi just across the parking lot. Another applicant, Randall explained. It's easier for us if we time multiple of you at the same time. The other man gave me a friendly wave, then just as pleasantly flipped me off, which was such a confusing series of events, I decided to log it away for later to process fully. Dead meat, he mouthed. Though it could have just as easily been red beets. What's the address of the turnaround? I asked, waving my phone to show the open Google Maps app. No phones, Randall said. Instead, he explained how I would recognize the turnaround point, a red-roofed, unmanned weighing station some way down Route 333, along with a few other basic guidelines. 1. Don't use your phone for any reason, not even for music. Leave it on airplane mode, or better, just power it off. Even if there's an emergency, use the handheld radio. 2. Do feel free to listen to the stereo, though. Station 86.9 FM is country, if that's your thing, but probably steer clear of station 96.3. No picking up hitchhikers. Not even if they look like they're hurt. Not even if they're begging and crying for a ride, especially if they're begging and crying. Really, don't. 4. Around halfway there, your rig will stall and come to a stop. Don't panic. Don't turn it off. Don't get out. Put it in park and wait exactly 1 minute and 47 seconds. After that, the engine should start back up. If, for some reason, the rig doesn't start after that time, well, it should. But if it doesn't, I asked. Hide, he said. Close your eyes until it does. But it should. Okay, then. These are all spelled out with more details in the employee handbook, he told me when I, understandably, tried asking more questions. You shouldn't have to worry about most of them unless you get the job. Just don't use your phone, and most importantly, don't freak out when the rig stalls out. But how do you already know it's going? He raised his hands and shook his head to signal no more questions. $800. I reminded myself. There's something slightly soul-sucking in the realization of how low a price you can be bought for. Then again, there's something soul-sucking in being a broke, unemployed college grad. So pick your poison. One last thing, Randall tells me from underneath the window. Whatever you see, whatever happens, don't ever stop driving. Not at all ominous. He winked. I watched as the other interviewee pulled away first. My competitor, I decided now that I really did have a second to process his introduction. Twat. After I'd adjusted my mirrors and seat, I pulled out after him, highly aware of the timer in Randall's hand as he shrunk to a pinprick in my rear view. The most nerve-wracking part of the whole experience. No GPS. I wasn't worried about getting lost. The instructions were basically to drive straight on Route 333 until I arrived. But there was something disconcerting about knowing if I did get lost, I wasn't allowed to look up my location. I don't think I'd ever actually driven anywhere new without my phone. I already know what you boomers out there will say. My generation is soft. We never learn to do things the hard way. We're addicted to technology. To which I'll respond, true, fair, really. But also, you try giving up your iPhone. The first minutes of the drive went smooth. The highway was a bit twisty, but otherwise calm, with a gorgeous view. Gargantuan trees, some variant of redwood I assumed, towered over me from every side, but pretty as it was, the two-lane road was practically deserted. No other cars passed me. None snuck up behind me. I flipped on my headlights to deal with the shade. It was a bit eerie, truthfully. After a while, I started catching glimpses of the competitor man's truck through the trees. I'd pass a bend and his rig would flash between branches and trunks. He'd disappear around turns, but I was catching up. How to get around him? The road was thin, and if this was some sort of a speed race, there was no way he'd pull over to let me get by. Maybe another lane would open up soon. Maybe if I honked, it would spook him enough to let me pass. Turns out, it didn't matter. Just as I was solidly behind him, my truck went silent. There was no sputter of life eking from a motor, nor the dying cough of an engine. The gas pedal simply stopped working. My rig slowed some more, then stopped. I was prepared for this. I waited. In my head, I counted. Randall had known. Somehow he'd known my rig would sputter out at some point, but he hadn't seemed concerned. Was it planned? Some way to see how we reacted in stressful situations? I found myself wildly looking around for a security camera. Don't be paranoid. Just like he'd told me, somewhere around second number 100, the engine roared back to life. My freight truck chugged forward, and when I applied gas, it sped up. All right, then. The rest of the drive was blessedly uneventful. I never caught back up to competitor man, but smooth otherwise. At some point, the trees petered out to a short stretch of desert highway, and then the red-roofed weighing station. I slowed down and looked at the time. This couldn't be right. I'd only been driving for half an hour or so, and the other truck had never passed me. Randall had said it usually took several hours to get here. This couldn't be the correct place. It was, though. It had to be. I was still on the Route 333. I was sure of it. This was the first weighing station, and the description matched perfectly. I pulled out the digital camera Randall had given me and snapped a picture. If I was wrong, at least I could claim stupidity, not that I'd been trying to cheat. Maybe that would be enough. I maneuvered the rig through the unmanned station and headed back the way I'd come. Eventually, I reached the redwoods. Oh, the world transformed from sunlight back to shadow and mist. Tendrils of fog wafted above exposed roots. I'd be back in just a few minutes now. Then the truck started to slow. I swore. Not again. Sure enough, though, the rig came to a stop in a section of the forest so shaded it could have been evening. Bugs sped in and out of the headlight beams. Something was off. Nerves, I told myself. This whole thing is strange, so you're overthinking. That was usually the problem. Overthinking. Spiraling until I shut down. It was the reason I majored in a subject that let me be quiet and clack away on my laptop. It was the reason I got a job on the campus shuttle where I wouldn't have to talk to anybody and applied for this position in the first place. It had been building for months, years maybe. This feeling that something in my life was wrong, off. But after I'd gone through and eliminated the only things it could be, all I was left with was me. The thing that was broken was me. And maybe that wasn't something I could realistically run away from, but I could sure try. For the first time in months while driving Route 333, I'd felt normal in the thrill of the leaving something behind. But now I was stopped, stagnant, and it was all back again. And then another realization. How long has it been? I hadn't counted this time. There hadn't been a need after last time, but it felt like at least a few minutes had passed. Maybe. I started counting in my head, 20, 45, 60. I gave up. It had definitely been longer than a minute 47. The truck still wasn't moving. The first cold edges of true fear crept into me, swelled up my spine and snaking around my heart. I waited some more. I swore some more. When neither of those delightfully brilliant options worked, I put the truck in park, cracked the door, and hopped down. Outside was chillier than I'd imagined. Weird. Sure, it was shady, but it was still summer. I considered trying to pop the hood of this thing. For some reason, all men, even those of us with no mechanical knowledge, feel a sense of control by ponderously examining broken engines. But for a massive beast like this, I couldn't pretend to know where to start. "Hello," I called. In the mist, off in the distance, there almost looked like a figure. Fog rolled through, and they vanished. Did they live around here? Maybe I could ask them for help. When the mist cleared, there was nobody. Hide. That's what Randall had told me, albeit offhandedly. Oh, hide and close your eyes. But that just felt silly. Some way for him to distract me from realizing he'd stuck me with a crappy vehicle. Either way, I needed to go back in for my phone. Forget the rules, I was calling for help. The handle was locked. I rounded to the other side and tried that handle too. Locked. Incessant swearing might not have solved my problems the first 2 times, but no reason not to try in a third, right? The coldness clutched my heart until I could barely breathe. I watched as more mist rolled into the trees, and the figure. It was back. Closer. For a second time, I almost called out for help. Hide. Before I could overthink my overthinking, before I could question how stupid I'd look, I dropped to my stomach and rolled under the truck. Then I squeezed my eyes shut. A set of footsteps approached the vehicle. I started to look up, but stopped myself and pressed my face to the asphalt where I wouldn't be tempted. Another set joined it, then another. They started moving faster, in no particular pattern around the rig. A dozen pittering dogs' feet, except heavier, more intentional. Frantic. Something tried at the door handles. I could hear the frustrated yank over and over. They were searching the area, looking for a way in. Don't look. Don't look. Don't. Above me, the engine roared to life. All at once, the 100 desperate footsteps stopped completely. I wasted no time. I rolled from my hiding spot, scrambled across the deserted road for the now unlocked door, and threw the rig into drive. Within seconds, I was hurtling back down the highway towards safety. That's it, I thought. I passed my twisted test, and now I get to return safely and refuse this sick job once and for all. And that was all true. I was safe. I would get to scream at Randall, just not before seeing what was behind the next turn. It came from nowhere. I swerved like crazy to avoid it. By the time I even processed what was obstructing the road, I'd already passed it with no chance of slowing back down. It had been my competitor's truck, totally stopped, diagonal across the whole road, and the man who'd been driving it? He'd been splayed across the hood, skewered through by a tree branch the length of a door. His eyes had been torn out. What was that? Now let's not get too excited. Randall looked up from his desk. Oh, back at the truck yard. What were those things? Who did that to the other guy? Other guy? He was stabbed by a tree. His eyes were literally empty sockets. Randall sighed, not the sigh of, "Oh no, there's a crazy man yelling at me." The sigh of, "Oh great, more paperwork." Unit 50. He spoke into his handheld radio. There's a cleanup a few miles in. Sounds like a messy one. Maybe give it an hour to let the forest dwellers settle down before going in for a retrieval. Cleanup? We have to call the police. We're not calling anybody. They prefer not to know about these things. We can't just leave him there. He held up his hands. I know you're in shock, but as I said, let's try to calm ourselves. Yelling isn't helping anyone. I get it. We'll make sure to retrieve him. Oh, it's totally understandable why you'd turn back early. Early? For some reason, it was this odd, insignificant fact that finally yanked me from my frenzy. As unjust as murder might be, to a recent graduate, nothing will ever top the injustice being failed on a test I know I passed. I didn't come back early. His eyebrows pinched together. I pulled out the digital camera and shoved the image of the turnaround point in his face. Slowly, his expression opened up to one of shock and awe. You were gone an hour, maybe an hour 30 at most. Randall considered. Then he stood, smiled, and stuck out his hand. You've got a job, yeah? I've got a... what? Have you not been listening? I just saw a dead man. I nearly died myself. There's absolutely no way I'm accepting whatever joke of a job this is. 140,000 base, plus benefits and overtime. 10 minutes later, I was signing the offer. Go ahead, hate me if you want, but never underestimate what you yourself wouldn't do under the weight of a six-figure student debt. If you're going to be unhappy, no matter where you are, you may as well be unhappy and rich. It was only hours later, after my flight home, after I was safe in my bed on campus, and the whole interview felt like a distant nightmare, that I finally cracked open my new employee handbook. I found the section on the 1-minute 47-second incident, Section 9.A. It explained what Randall had, that I should count in my head, not freak out, and usually nothing would happen. There was some additional explanation, too. If your engine does not immediately come to life after the waiting period has concluded, then close your eyes and hide. The things in the forest will eventually lose interest. Above all, remain in your vehicle. If you leave at any point during the hunting ceremony, they will know your scent. You will never rest again. Absolutely, under no circumstances may you ever pick up a hitchhiker. It's common for unfamiliar persons to approach truck drivers on Route 333 asking for a lift. It does not matter who the person in question may be. It does not matter if they are a nursing mother with a newborn child or a lost preteen in great distress. Never, for any reason, under any conditions, may you provide one of said persons with requested rides. You won't survive if you do. Employee Handbook. Section 3.B, Part 1. Why are you doing this? That was the thing my girlfriend of 3 years asked me repeatedly in the days leading up to my departure. The start day for my new trucking gig drew closer. I'd be moving to a totally different state. I did just graduate. I do need a job. Trucking has nothing to do with your major. Stay here. To be fair, most jobs have nothing to do with English. That's sort of the issue. Day after day, though, Myra continued to ask why I was doing this. I could have gone with the easy answer, the money, which really had been why I'd signed my contract in the first place. But the closer my start date got, the more I was sure that wasn't the whole reason I was leaving. How did I put into words this growing feeling inside me that I couldn't stay, that I wasn't happy there, or anywhere, really, and how it was slowly suffocating me? And while it wasn't her fault, she also wasn't the solution as much as she wished she could be. So I had to go. I had to. But yeah, I'm fairly sure what I actually did say was just money. Sue me. You can still call me, she said the night before my flight. We'll talk every day while you're driving, yeah? I don't know, I said. I think probably not. There's a whole section in the employee handbook about how I can only use the radio. So, they won't know. How are we supposed to do long distance if we can't talk? I remembered the bloodied corpse of the other interviewee skewered to his hood. I remembered the scratch of my own face pressed to the pavement as things skittered around my rig. How could I explain why I had to follow the phone rule, too? I stayed silent. Her voice got soft. We're breaking up, aren't we? I think we are. For a second, I thought Myra might slap me. She's not mean, but she's impulsive, the type of girl who has a midlife crisis every other Tuesday and frequently shows up with a brand new life philosophy tattooed on her thigh. One of the things I loved about her. But it wasn't always easy to predict what drastic things she'd do to cope. Instead, she hugged me, kissed me on the cheek, and left. At the door to my apartment, she paused. Goodbye. Oh, Brendan Tall. In the job preparation packet, my new trucking company was very clear on one thing. Read the employee handbook. So I did what anybody would do in this situation. I skimmed it. I'm sure at this point, those of you who read my last post are clucking your tongues disapprovingly. Really, Brendan? One dead body wasn't enough? Didn't you already accidentally break a rule last time? But let me ask you this. What was the last job you worked where you read the entire employee handbook back to front? That's what I thought. The parts I did read had some weird stuff in them. There was your typical information, what to pack for overnighters and general rig maintenance guidelines, but also some odder things. Sections on what to do if the moon forgot to show up on a night it was supposed to, or explanations on which gas stations were normal and which ones had rules to obey, like don't stare anybody in the eyes, not even if they're speaking directly at you. There was a whole page with a bullet list on which FM radio stations were safe and which might put you into a trance for hours / make you crave non-food substances. Never speed. Read a sentence in Section 5.A. If you do, it may draw the attention of the Highway Patrol. They are not Highway Patrol. They will not give you a ticket. You do not want to find out what they will give you as punishment instead. Basically, I was around 90 to 95% sure I would die a morbidly gruesome death my first real time on Route 333, more of a passing interest than an actual fear, which probably just demonstrates how damaged my psyche was. I'm happy to report, however, my first haul went off without a hitch. The first section was redwood groves, followed by hours of desert pockmarked with rundown towns, and finally some twisting mountain canyons. I crashed in the sleeper after delivering my haul at an abandoned building. That's where they told me to leave it. I woke up early the next morning to finish the route and did so alive and well. My truck stopped for a minute, 47 seconds, at the same part as last time, but there was no additional visit from the things in the forest. Randall hadn't actually seemed overly concerned when I explained to him how I had in fact gotten out of the truck during the interview, so I chose not to be too worried for now. Back at the truck yard, I dangled my keys in front of Randall. He whistled. 14 hours there and back. That is simply unheard of. Can I ask you what I actually delivered? No. No, you may not. He smiled cheerily and plucked the keys from me. I was still having a hard time figuring Randall out. Either he was a passive-aggressive jerk, or he simply had an odd sense of humor. Either way, he hadn't seemed too concerned when the other man in my interview had gotten savagely murdered, so that probably tipped the scales towards jerk. My next few weeks went almost equally smooth. Still no incidents in the Redwood section. Randall and the other dispatchers started sending me on longer and longer trips down Route 333. They would last 3, sometimes 4 days at a time. I didn't mind, I was getting massive amounts of overtime, but I did get the odd sense the dispatchers were almost excited about the fact I was going so far. I knew there was a part in the employee handbook about how the road would expand over time. A drive that took me 4 hours might take another driver 8 or more. Eventually, there would be a breaking point, a rapid expansion where a section of the road that took you minutes would now take weeks. From tidbits of conversations with other drivers, I got the impression there were truckers who hadn't quit in time, who'd been stuck on Route 333 for years, trying to get back. Frankly, most days I didn't care much. For the first time in years, my racing thoughts were finally slowing. My chronic overthinking was fading away to a sense of pleasant numbness. Whatever happened, however this road worked, was the same to me. Before I'd started trucking, I'd been worried that the loneliness would get to me. Now, the only thing I worried about anymore was about how entirely fine I was being this alone. I'd stopped for fuel at a petro speed when I heard it. At first, I couldn't entirely place the voice, and I just continued filling up. Something nagged the recesses of my mind, though, a thin thread yanking and yanking. Finally, I twisted to see who belonged to the voice across the parking lot. I gaped. It was Myra, my ex-girlfriend, talking animatedly with what looked like one of the Petro Speed workers. As I got closer, I could make out their conversation. "Oh, what do you mean there's no mechanics in the area?" Myra jabbed a finger at her car. "How am I supposed to keep driving in that thing?" "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the nearest town is hours away. You'll have to call a towing company." "I don't want to call a towing company. I want to find somebody here." "I understand that, ma'am, but—" "Myra?" I asked. She whirled, looking as if she was going to snap at me too, then realized who I was. Her hands flew to her mouth, then she sprinted at me and threw herself in my arms. I laughed. "This is insane. What are you doing here?" "Looking for you." "Looking for—" "Myra, you haven't even called me." "Yes, I did. I've called a dozen times the last few days, and you never picked up. I got worried. I wanted to see you." I wouldn't have picked up. I was on the 3rd day of a 4-day trip. I didn't even bring my phone anymore to avoid the temptation of using it. Something like this, her somehow tracking me down to the middle of nowhere, felt exactly like the sort of impulsive thing Myra would do. Entirely insane, but the exact reason I fell in love with her. "Amazing luck," she said. "If my car hadn't died, I wouldn't have stopped here. Can I ride with you?" We talked for hours. It was just like before. We laughed and sang along to the limited country songs we knew at ear-shattering volumes. After a few hours, she grabbed my hand, and I didn't stop her. I thought I was fine with the loneliness, but having her here, physically with me, I knew I'd minded more than I let myself believe. I never thought you'd want to talk with me again, I told her. At first, I didn't. She stroked my knuckle with her thumb. So I don't think I'll ever stop loving you. I felt amazing. No, better than amazing. I felt happy. I glowed the whole evening, all up until we stopped at a rest stop for the night, and she slipped into the building for the bathroom. Everything's good, I reported on my handheld radio as part of my nightly check-in. Yes, somehow this radio was capable of connecting back with dispatch. I'd given up wondering how. You sound chipper, Randall said. Crazy story, actually. I told him about running into Myra, about how I was giving her a lift back to civilization, and how good it was to see her. He went quiet. You know you aren't supposed to pick up hitchhikers, he said. I didn't. She's not a hitchhiker. I know her. Did she ask you for a ride? No. I offered her a ride. But I hadn't, had I? I would have. But she'd gotten to asking first. A slow, deadly chill spread up my back. Who are you talking to? Myra climbed into the cab in PJs. Nobody. Nobody at all. She fell asleep instantly, cuddled up next to me. This was Myra, of all people. I knew her. She wasn't a stranger. I hadn't broken any rules. Why wasn't I allowed to just be happy for once? I forced myself to close my eyes, steady my breaths, and drift off to sleep. I woke up hours later. It was a gradual wake-up. Something wet was on my face. My eyes didn't snap open. Instead, for some inexplicable reason, I cracked them open just a fraction, thin enough they still appeared closed. She was staring at me. In the early morning light, Myra watched me with an enormous grin across her face, fully awake. She leaned in and ran her tongue from my chin up to my forehead. I love you, she whispered. Do you need the bathroom? I asked hours later. We were stopped at a rest stop a mere hour or two from the end of Route 333. The last few hours, the conversation had been tense. She hadn't wanted to get out to stretch her legs once. I'd pushed. She'd gotten annoyed. I'm good. You haven't gone all day. You didn't go yesterday either, she giggled, like I'd told some joke. She reached out to my face and ran a single sharpened nail along my cheek. It's almost like you want to get rid of me. I swallowed and pretended to ignore the drip of blood from my chin. Of course not. I took the keys with me when I went to fill up the tank. She pressed her face up against the glass the whole time, smiling down at me, waving incessantly. When I climbed back in, she giggled. Don't take so long, she said. I missed you. We drove. She became increasingly cuddly. Her grip when she held my hand, it was tight, too tight. There would be bruises tomorrow. She started leaning across the center divide to kiss my cheek and rake her teeth against my neck. Stop, I said. No. I stopped 3 more times to stretch my legs. You should too, I said each time, but she refused. She wouldn't leave. Stop it, she growled the 4th time we stopped. Her face distorted into a grotesque mask, then softened back into a smile. I'll miss you. Myra, I took a breath. There's actually something I need to ask you. Yes? It's not something I can ask you in a truck. Though. Her face scrunched in annoyance. Her breath grew harsh and gravelly. These last 2 days have been amazing, I said. They've made me realize how much I missed you and need to be with you. The thing I need to ask you, I have to kneel for it. A soft smile tugged at her lips. Finally, she relented. She followed me from the truck. As we walked to a clearing in the forest, her steps grew more erratic and random, more excited, perhaps. The skin on her face looked less smooth and more like plastic, like something designed in a factory. "Close your eyes," I whispered and sunk my hand into my pocket, showingly. She did. Then I bolted for the truck. It was seconds before she realized what was happening, and even longer before she started after me. By the time the thing, the not Myra, reached me, the doors were already locked. I was already rolling away. Her face was something entirely inhuman. Her eyes dripped like melted wax from her empty sockets, and her hair peeled off in clumps. "No!" she screeched. "I love you! Don't leave me!" But I did, for the second time. When I returned to the truck yard, I said nothing of what had happened. Randall didn't either, though he seemed visibly surprised to see me. He simply accepted my keys with a wink. Jerk, I decided. Definitely a jerk. The first thing I did when I got in my car was make a phone call. The person on the other end picked up after the second ring. Neither of us spoke. We breathed into the receiver, waiting for the other to initiate. "Hi," I said. "Oi." How could I ever have forgotten what Myra's true voice sounded like? Nothing in her tone suggested she was anything but safe, something I already knew, but actually confirming it let me relax for the first time in hours. "Brendan," she said, "why are you calling?" "I don't entirely know." "Are you all right?" she asked. "I'm not sure." She was silent. I was too. "You should know. I know it doesn't matter, but I think you should know. I'm with somebody new," she said. "Okay. That's it?" "I think so. Yeah." Myra huffed out a laugh, though I was entirely certain she thought none of this was funny. "Why did you do this to me?" she snapped. I opened my mouth, then closed it. "Nothing?" she asked when I didn't reply. "Really? Brendan, you left after 3 years, no warning, and you never really even told me why. You haven't called once, you haven't texted, not even to tell me you're all right. I loved you, and you threw me away. Decent people don't do that. I get that you have your own stuff going on, but that's a terrible way to treat somebody." "It is." I sighed and leaned my head against the steering wheel. "Myra, I think there's something broken about me. Don't be dramatic. I'm not. Something's always been broken about me, and I don't know how to fix it. I don't even know what it is, but I am sorry. That wasn't fair of me to leave like that. You deserve to hate me." A pause. "I could never hate you," she whispered. We hung up. Before either of us could start crying, I suspected. For a few minutes, sitting there after the call, I considered quitting. I should have been afraid of Route 333, after everything I'd seen on it. After the bodies and the creatures that weren't quite human, it would make sense for me to leave. Anybody in my situation would be considering the same. Anybody smarter than me probably would have quit. I couldn't, though. I was afraid of the road, of the things that prowled behind the trees and waited in empty gas station shower stalls. I was afraid of the things that perhaps knew my scent and the thing that had slept next to me in bed. Of course I was. I was just afraid of the real world more. So I stayed. I kept driving, and one day when the road expands past days long into weeks long, possibly even years long, I will keep driving. Okay, guys, I really should clarify a few things at this point. The first of which being that while it is true, I may not have immediately read the entire employee handbook before the incidents of my last post, I had read most of it. Chapter headings, section descriptions, general overview, etc. Even if I'd read the entire part about hitchhikers, it wouldn't have prevented the whole incident with not Myra. And plus, I'll remind you that I'm not actually dead yet, so I'm not entirely helpless. The main issue with the employee handbook is that it's vague. Sure, there are rules and guidelines, but I get the impression Randall and the rest of the dispatchers don't entirely know what's going on either. This road, Route 333, makes its own rules. It doesn't always care to inform us about them. Okay, and second thing, I have actually gone to therapy before. Hey, I'd prefer not to get into it much with a bunch of anonymous online Redditors, no offense, but it wasn't especially helpful. For some people, I know therapy makes things harder first before it makes them better. But for me, it sort of just made things harder. And harder. And harder. Something about the vulnerability of it. I've tried a few medications too, but I've heard some people are pretty resistant to them. I suspect that's me. Even so, thank you for all your concerns. For real. Now, on to something more related to Route 333 and the many ways I repeatedly almost get myself killed. Because let's be real, that's why you're here, not to hear about my ever-degrading mental state. Mainly, I realize I haven't said much about the other truckers, I'm sure to nobody's surprise. I mainly avoided the other drivers the first few weeks at my job. Every few hours, I'd pass one of them on Route 333 and give a small wave. But apart from that, I was in no rush to make new friends, especially not ones in their 40s and 50s. If it weren't for the faceless man, I might have never gotten to know them at all. There's not much of a section in the employee handbook on the faceless man. The only mention is when it says, "The faceless man has learned how to unlock doors from the inside." Like I said, vague. Ominous too, though, so I made sure to close my windows and lock the doors every night before laying down on the cab sleeper. Generally, I'd leave the windows shut even if it was sweltering. But one night it got especially sweltering. There weren't many clouds in the sky. I'd already tossed and turned in my sweaty sheets for an hour before I decided to let in some air. Just a crack. I even wiggled my fingers in the open space to make sure that's all that could get through. When I tried to sleep this time, there was enough of a breeze to let me. The next time I woke, it was still night. The moon was covered by clouds, but enough light made it through to illuminate the interior of the cab. Clouds. I sat up. There was no reason to be afraid. I knew this. I hadn't broken any rules. The doors were locked and secured. Even so, I glanced first at the driver's side window and then the passenger. My entire existence jerked to a stop. It stared at me through the glass. At least, that's what I assumed it was doing. The thing had no eyes, no ears, no hair, and no mouth. The only feature reminiscent of a living creature's were two snake-like slits in the middle of the face, a nose of some sort. It faced me. It smelled. I could audibly hear the inhale even through the door, and the slits widened to holes the size of chestnuts. Light from the truck stop caught on each individual hair, almost like teeth. "Hello?" I tried, but no sound came out. I forced my throat to clear and tried again. "Do you need something? Are you the faceless man?" Right. Because of course the thing with no ears or mouth is going to hear you and respond. And then I thought, maybe the name Faceless Man is somehow offensive, so I immediately asked, "Unless you prefer to be called something different?" Because apparently I'd literally already forgotten this thing could not hear me. If you can't tell, I tend to overthink whilst in uncomfortable situations. By this point, I'd already experienced enough oddities of the road that I was content to just curl there in the corner and wait until the thing left. That's exactly what I would have done if the faceless man hadn't reached a hand with 7 fingers up and tapped the glass. Quick clarification. When I say fingers, that's probably precisely what you envision. Fingers. What I really mean is 7 bleach-white protrusions, each a meter long, with dozens of joints and gnarled nails curling from their tips. I watched in horror as each of the fingers felt along the glass, found the lip, then snaked inwards. "Nope," I told it. "That's not happening. You're not doing that." I scrambled for my pants, then decided it really wasn't worth it, and clambered for the driver's seat in my boxers. Ah, the faceless man inhaled again and swiveled to follow my movement. Out, I commanded and twisted the key. The truck roared to life. The ivory fingers felt around, sliding past the unlock button and heading directly for the inner handle. One last chance, I warned, even though it was entirely clear by now the thing wasn't able to hear me. When it predictably continued to not be able to hear me, I did what anybody would do in this situation. I rolled up the window. They flattened. Each cylindrical finger compressed where the glass closed into them, and the thing outside shuddered in pain. It yanked at them, trying to escape, but unable. I gave it 2 more seconds, then cracked the window again. The faceless man yanked its fingers from my car, exhaled greenish globs of what I suspect was snot on my window, then skittered away. So, needless to say, I got an early start that morning. While that whole incident did shake me up and made me demand a rig with internal AC, non-negotiable, it reminded me of something. The faceless man had tracked my movements by smelling me. Maybe that was just a coincidence. Probably smells were how it was drawn to any human. But there was already another subset of road dwellers who apparently knew my scent. Could the faceless man somehow be connected? The employee handbook said very little about the topic, and Randall hadn't seemed overly talkative when I'd asked him about the things in the forest. I approached a few co-workers instead. They explained that no, the faceless man probably wasn't connected to the things in the forest. They were confined to the forest. He was confined to cloudy nights. He was just a harmless pest. Basically like a raccoon, looking for somewhere to warm up, though he would occasionally suffocate people by shoving his fingers down their throat, so maybe not entirely harmless. They also told me not to trust any energy drink brands I didn't recognize at gas stations, and to avoid coffee at late-night diners. The coffee wasn't dangerous. It just was nasty. I started talking with the other drivers at the truck yard before and after hauls. We'd chat when we stopped for showers at the same time and radio greetings when we passed each other on the road. Slowly, I got to know some of them. Deidre was a divorced mom of 3. She hated she had to be away from her kids for such long stretches, but this job's pay was the only way she'd be able to send her oldest to college. Then there was Vikram. He immigrated with his family from India about 10 years ago. He tried taxiing in Chicago, but the pay was crap and the people were rude. He liked long hauling much better. Chris was more of a short hauler. He'd been on Route 333 for almost 15 years, longer than anybody else. He'd started like me with an extremely short drive time, and the road had taken its sweet time expanding for him. He mainly did short trips now to be safe, 1 or 2 day hauls. That's how long it took him to get out of the Redwood section to the first turnaround point from my interview. About 10 times slower than me still. Even so, he could still cover ground quicker than some of the others. "I'll be done in a year or 2, he confided in me once over breakfast at a diner. "They pay me more than anybody, but takes me longer to get anything done. Besides, I don't want to risk getting lane locked. That's what we call it. Lane locked. Usually, Route 333 expands at an even pace, but eventually, without warning, it will one day explode in length. What took hours to drive the previous day might take weeks or even years now. There's signs to watch out for. Less stars in the sky than usual, rest stop attendants getting colder to you, expansion at an increasing pace, but it's impossible to predict the exact moment lane locking happens. There's always a risk of getting taken unawares. It's like a fever breaking, Deidre explained to me. We're the virus. It takes a minute for the highway to get immune to us, but once it does, it happens all at once. There's a small stretch far out into the desert where it's common to see a neon orange flatbed heading the direction of the real world. Oh, sometimes it's missing. It slips into pockets of the road the rest of us luckily haven't accessed yet, but always eventually you see the flatbed again. Same area. Still driving. How long has he been going now? I asked Chris one morning. 6, maybe 7 years. Al's a good guy. We'll pull over and talk occasionally. His time came quicker than most. How much ground has Al covered? Chris exhaled through his mouth and shook his head. To you? A few miles, maybe. He'll never make it back, not in 100 years. He has a family, though. He refuses to quit. Some do, though. Some accept they're stuck, that it's not worth years of their life trying to get out, and find a new sort of life on Route 333. People like Tiff. The first time I met Tiff, I was getting coffee at 3 in the morning at the Wayside Diner. It's true. The coffee at late-night diners on Route 333 is truly, utterly disgusting. But I was desperate for any sort of caffeine, however crappy. I was only a few hours from the truck yard terminal, and if possible, I try not to sleep on the highway more than absolutely necessary. Call me high maintenance, but I'm still not a fan of waking up to see Mr. Nose sniffing longingly at me. A middle-aged waitress delivered my coffee and waited there as I sipped it. What the? I looked up at her. This is actually palatable. Not exactly a compliment, but I'll take it. The woman slid in the booth across from me. You must be the new one. Brendan, right? Yeah. I wasn't used to people on Route 333 knowing who I was, or really even acknowledging me. It was still unclear from the handbook and my interactions with them if they were actual people or just sort of there. This woman seemed different, though. I'm Tiff, former employee turned waitress. I've heard of you. The others, they mention you. Still remember me, do they? Glad to hear I'm not entirely forgotten. Almost never visit me anymore. You work here? She shrugged. When I want. Staffing lets me fill in. Not so sure if they're letting me, as much as I tell them I work here and they believe me. Doesn't pay anything, but it's not like I need money anymore, just like chatting. Oh, I much prefer real people, though. She clasped her hands and muscles flexed along her fully tattooed arms. Tiff was exactly the type of tough woman you'd imagine would become a trucker. Well, that mixed with the sort of desperate, lonely friendliness only found at an old folks' home. Tell me, she said, what was your first reaction when you realized Route 333 wasn't a normal road? I always ask that. I don't think I've ever screamed at an interviewer before. She laughed. And after you started working? It was a bit weird, I guess. I don't know, I just sort of accepted it. A bit weird. She eyed me, then reached for my cup and took a swig. You seem like somebody going through something. True enough. We talked for hours that night. She grabbed us some pie from the counter and she asked about my life and talked about hers. She'd been offered a position on Route 333 for years before she actually accepted. She'd heard the rumors. She knew the sort of dangers it offered. When she finally took a position, it was only because her daughter got a brain tumor. Treatment was expensive. Her daughter didn't survive, but after that, Tiff kept hauling to stave off the loneliness. I told her I understood. She told me that no, I didn't actually, seeing how I was a 20-odd-something puppy boy, but that I probably had my own similar thing. I did understand that was close enough, so she wasn't offended. By the time we called it quits, the sun was already rising. I don't remember everything we talked about, but I do remember myself standing up, patting her shoulder and saying, I'll talk to Randall. We'll find some way for you to get out of here. Her face went dark. You shouldn't have said that. Not where the road can hear you. I slept a few hours, then got up around noon. Before I left, I decided to take a shower. The water in the personal shower room was cold. I waited a few minutes for it to heat up, But when it didn't, I decided that realistically there were people dying from parasites in other countries, and a cold shower likely wouldn't result in a grueling end. It did still suck, though. I finished that thing in a minute flat, then twisted the faucet to off. The water didn't stop. I tried twisting it the other way. The water only got stronger, and the drain in the floor. It had stopped working. Freezing water was building up in a puddle. Soon it overflowed the lip of the shower and onto the tile. I sighed, dressed, and went for the door. My shower sandals slapped all the way there. It was locked. I flipped the lock back and forth, but any way I attempted, the door wouldn't budge. I pounded at it until the cold touch of water licked my ankles. It was around then I realized I was in trouble. "Hey!" I screamed repeatedly, but nobody seemed to hear me. The water was at my knees now. How is it coming so fast? I waded back to the shower, tried the handle again, then did my first truly stupid thing of this incident. You all know by now I'm bound to do something stupid eventually. I bound my towel around the shower head to stop the flow, which didn't work a bit. Then I proceeded to slip, trip, and yank the towel with me. The shower head tore off. The rate of water doubled. It was at my shoulders now. The water started pumping out brown and sludgy. It was too murky to see through. And my feet! Things began to brush against them. Just my clothes, I told myself, but since when did my clothes have scales? I pounded at the door. I stood on the handle to keep my face above the water. There had to be some way out. I couldn't die like this. There was only a foot of breathable air now. Then 6 inches. Then 1. I gasped a final breath as the slimy, scaled things wrapped around my ankles and jerked me down. I flailed to escape, but where would I go? There was no more air. The entire room was full of glacier water. My vision started dimming. I felt my throat convulsing, begging me to breathe. I couldn't resist anymore. The door flew open. Hundreds of gallons of water sloshed out of the bathing room into the hallway. It slammed me against the wall, but I gasped and struggled to my feet. When I stood, the hallway was dry. The shower room was dry. My dirty clothes were in a heap on the bench where I'd left them, totally, you guessed it, dry. The only thing that was sopping wet was me. Tiff walked into the hallway a few seconds later with a garbage bag. She glanced from me in my sopping clothes to the open door of the shower room, then back to me. "I told you you shouldn't have said that." "What just happened?" I demanded, followed by a fountain of colorful words. "A threat. The road doesn't like to give up things it's claimed for its own. Don't try to help me escape, Brendan." With that, she shook her head, stepped over the puddle at my feet, and carried the trash down the hallway. It took me some time to change my clothes, dry off, and even more time to calm down once I was finally able to think. The way Tiff had told me not to help her had been calm, resigned. She'd given up years ago. She'd accepted this truck stop and its miniature diner was her life now, because the only alternative was something worse. The road had claimed her. It wanted her to stay, and it would hurt anyone who tried to take her, except it couldn't hurt me. That realization, that shining understanding, more golden than any moment of happiness, filled me with hope. Route 333 couldn't hurt me because I had nothing I cared about. It could kill me, but so what? Why should that bother me? My life didn't matter to me, which meant I could defy the road all I wanted. Tiff might have given up, but I hadn't. I was going to get her out, or die trying. I'd finally found something I hadn't had in years. A reason. As you might remember, I ended my last post with a delightfully heroic announcement. I was going to save Tiff, defy the road, and risk my very life to do so. As befits the commencement of any noble quest, I started my journey in the same way as any fearless hero. I tried to get somebody else to do the work for me. "Randall," I began, "I get the impression you're about to say something I won't like. We need to rescue the stranded truckers." "Thought so. There has to be something we can do to get them out. Tiff doesn't even have a vehicle anymore. She says her old one broke down, but maybe we can haul her a car." "We're not in the business of handing free cars to non-employees." "I'll buy it," I said. "Maybe she can share with Al." The other driver stuck on Route 333, the one still driving. "This isn't funny." "Of course. It isn't funny." Randall slammed his hands on the desk and shot to his feet. "I find nothing humorous in you messing with things you have no idea about. Maybe if you answered more of my questions, I would have more of an idea. You don't get to hand us an obscure employee handbook, then expect us to be good little soldier boys who follow your every order without ever giving us any explanations at all." "Yes, actually, I do get to expect that. That's what the extremely generous salary is for." "Oh, shove off. Money doesn't let you treat us like crap." "Oh, I think it was his smirk that did it." Randall was fuming as much as me, but he still managed a satisfied smile as if to say, "You're stuck. You know it. You won't leave." And he was right. Nowhere else paid this well, not for a college grad. I'd moved my whole life to California. I absolutely couldn't go back now. But that smirk, "Find a new driver." I stormed out of the office. For any of you who've fantasized about doing the exact same thing at your current job, I can assure you it feels every bit as good as you imagined, and more. I kept expecting the horror of what I'd done to hit, but it didn't. Instead, I seethed on my drive home. I seethed as I heated up dinner in the microwave, and I seethed as I went to bed. It had been so long since I'd cared about anything that I forgot how strong it could feel. I woke up at 1 a.m. to a screaming cell phone. Those of you who've read this far have probably noticed my attempts at sleep often get interrupted. Faceless men watching me, my exes licking my face, the likes. If you're bored of this repeated occurrence, I'd just like to add my signature to that ballot. At what age did 8 hours of healthy sleep become such a wildly unrealistic request? I was so groggy I didn't even bother to check the caller ID before picking up. Big mistake. "We need you to come in," Randall said. "Now. It's the middle of the night. This is an emergency." I cussed him out. "If you'll remember, I quit less than 10 hours ago." "You're not still going on about that, are you? You didn't quit, you just stormed out." "Look, I apologize for whatever it is that made you so ticked earlier, all right? We good? Now stop throwing a fit and get yourself to the terminal." "I'm not coming in." I hung up on him mid-sentence. If I weren't so tired, that probably would have felt almost as phenomenal as walking out. At least until the point that Randall called again. I declined. He called again. I declined. He called, I kid you not, 12 more times. 12. Probably I should have blocked him at that point, but I still wasn't thinking straight. The 13th time, I finally picked back up. "Stop. Please." Randall's tone was different now. He'd lost his usual superior edge. There was only desperation. "Brendan, this isn't a game. Come in tonight, right now, and I'll include a $10,000 bonus on your next paycheck." My finger hovered above the hang-up button. "Not a bonus," I said. "A yearly raise." "That's not how promotions work here." "It wouldn't be a promotion. You would be rehiring me. I already quit, remember?" Randall cussed me out. How it felt good to hear him so undeniably lose his cool. Fine, you win. You'll get your rehiring bonus. Just come in. His tone lowered. Okay, but we're not really redoing the paperwork for you to be fired and rehired. That's just excessive. It is. Did I feel like a sellout? A little. But at least Randall was pissed. My grand defiance for authority had lasted barely 8 hours, and I now knew my ego was worth a scant 10 grand. More than I'd thought, actually. Student loans really are no joke. As soon as I reached the truck yard, Randall handed me a cup of coffee and a set of keys. The trailer's already hooked up. You don't even need to take it far tonight. Just get it onto Route 333, and then you can sleep for a few hours if you want. Where am I going? Randall exhaled. He handed me a map. Something he'd never done before. I hadn't even known maps of Route 333 existed, and showed me where I was headed. But that's at least 5 days from here. That's a 10-day haul. I only brought one set of clothes. I threw some of mine in the cab. When I tried to interrupt, he held up his hand. And yes, it's one with AC. There was that, at least. What's in the trailer? I asked. He didn't even respond, just raised an eyebrow, back to his usual condescending self. That was fair, I supposed. I had agreed to take the job again, and I knew the rules. No peeking. Obviously, I'd asked the other drivers about what we were hauling. They were more than happy to offer up knowledge like best pullouts for a quick nap, what diners fried the best bacon, and how to avoid running into the things with zippers on their stomachs. Anytime I tried asking about our cargo, though, the mood changed. Their faces darkened. They sobered. Sometimes not knowing a secret can drive you mad, Deidre confided in me once. But sometimes it's knowing the secret that does it. In this job, you have to figure out which it is. I didn't trust that management always had our best interests in mind, but I did trust the other drivers. I gave up asking what we were hauling. I let myself stop wondering. If I could live with not knowing, that probably meant it was the latter of Deidre's options. Finding out would be the worse alternative. That night, though, driving through massive redwoods beneath a starry sky, I wasn't sure. The not knowing, the wondering. It was going to kill me. I was so distracted, it took me almost by surprise when my rig sputtered, slowed, then stopped. By now, I knew to expect this interruption. It happened every trip down Route 333. The exact location would vary, but it always happened in the redwood section. Per usual, I clicked start on the stopwatch I'd begun carrying. Somewhere around a minute 55, I stopped it. There was no point in keeping track of the time anymore. I already knew I'd been stalled for too long. Control your breath. Don't panic. Close your eyes. Hide. This hadn't happened since my interview, but I'd always known this was a possibility. The other drivers talked about multiple minute timeouts happening to them, and none of them had ever gotten hurt. All I had to do was crouch in between my seat and the sleeper bed, shut my eyes, and ignore the very real fact that these things had my scent. The footsteps began. They scurried around my rig. Occasionally, things would tap or knock on the metal. Something yanked at the door handles. They stayed shut. At one point, the entire truck shuddered as if a dozen bodies were slamming themselves against one side in an attempt to tip it. The truck stayed put. It would get worse, I knew. That's what had happened the first time. The footsteps had increased steadily until I could hear nothing else, and then the engine had started. Except the footsteps didn't get worse. Instead, the scurrying calmed down. The forest dwellers were still out there. I could hear the pitter of feet, but it was calmer, less frantic. Was this some sort of a trick? Did they think I couldn't hear them and would open my eyes? A moment later, I knew that theory was wrong. They weren't trying to hide. They were trying to quiet down enough to speak with me. Give it to us. The voice wasn't a voice exactly. It was the rustle of leaves, the snap of branches underfoot, and the tinkle of wind chimes, all somehow combined in a way that formed words. I held my breath. We smell you, he who dwells on stone. Your odor has presented itself here once before, in our domain. We demand an audience. I kept still. Was there anything in the employee handbook about actually speaking with them? I didn't think so, but maybe I'd missed it. Maybe you should really read the whole thing, Brendan. The strange not voice seemed to sigh. Speak with us, or we slash your tires. A pretty convincing argument, in my opinion. What do you want? I asked. The thing you carry in your moving device. Relinquish possession of it to us. Interesting proposition. Unfortunately, the cargo isn't really mine to begin with, so I'm not really in a position to hand anything over. I'm sure you understand. Relinquish it, and we will allow you open passage through our lands for the rest of your travels. Do not, and we will tear apart your machine. Also a pretty convincing argument. What is it? I asked. That is not an answer one life force may give another. Case or like you don't know. Of course we know, the thing said defensively. Really? Because it sounds like you're bluffing right now. We know. The thing calmed itself down. I'll relinquish your load, and we will allow passage to all of your kind for the next generation. I remembered the man skewered on the hood of his truck. These things weren't bluffing. They could kill us, and easily, too. How many people would I save over a generation if I agreed? And yet, I didn't know what was in my cargo, but I did know these things killed humans for merely looking at them. If they wanted my haul, it couldn't be for anything good. So I did the only thing I could think to do. I stalled. How about a clue? I asked. Surely you can give me a clue of what I'm hauling. It couldn't, it informed me. So I pushed. The thing got more and more frustrated. I got more and more anxious. The footsteps grew restless again. They began circling my truck, looking for a way in. One of them, I got the impression it was the one speaking to me, scratched at the door. It slammed against the window, the sound of cracking glass. You are merely attempting to waste our time, the forest thing accused. That is the plan, yes. It slammed the glass again. More cracking. Bad. Real bad. I could practically sense the creature drawing back, preparing for a third and final strike, about to break in. The engine roared to life. I whooped and scrambled for the front. Just before I uncovered my eyes, though, I realized the footsteps were still there, circling my truck. They hadn't left. I didn't consider. I didn't allow myself time to think up a secondary plan. I just leapt into my seat, threw the car in drive, and slammed my foot on the gas, all without looking. The truck lurched forward. I forced my eyes to stay closed for 2, 4, 6 seconds before letting them spring open. A turn was coming up. I jerked the wheel to the left, but not in time to avoid the low-hanging branches that battered against my front windshield. I retook control, never slowing once, and never glancing in the rear view. I'd escaped. It was only a couple hours later, when I was well into the desert and far enough to feel comfortable, that I finally pulled to the side of the road to survey the damage. The driver window had splinters running through it. There were dents along the skirt of the freight carrier, but it was otherwise intact. I circled to the back to make sure everything was still locked and secure. It was. Everything's fine. Get some sleep. You're fine. And then, as often happens just after the movie protagonist says, "Oh, it's all good, guys," I was immediately disabused of my delusions of safety. Something was crying. I pressed my ear to the metal of the freight. Sure enough, inside the container, faint but audible, was a little girl's sobs. "Hello?" I asked. "Do you need help?" The crying cut off. I waited another 10 minutes with my ears pressed to the container, but the crying never started again. The thing stayed silent. It would have been easy. For the sake of my sanity, I could have chalked it up to imagination. I was sleep-deprived and in shock, and of course I'd heard crying. It was my own inner child acting out from revulsion at this entire stressful situation. That's what it was. But it wasn't. I'd learned something, though what I now knew I wasn't totally sure. Was the thing in the cargo bay a person, a creature, a child? Sometimes not knowing a secret can drive you mad. Sometimes knowing the secret is worse. What's in the trailer? Through the radio, Randall sighed. In case anybody is unfamiliar with the mechanics of the handheld radio, you have to actually be pushing the transmit button for your voice to go through. Which meant Randall was being a passive-aggressive crybaby who intentionally decided for me to hear his sigh of annoyance. Sometimes managers are just the worst. I stood just outside my truck where I'd pulled over on the side of the highway to check my vehicle for damage. For those who don't remember from my last post, the things in the forest attacked me to try and get whatever was in the trailer. It was still dark outside. "We literally just had this conversation," he said. "Oh, like 3 hours ago." "That was before I heard something inside the cargo. You tell me what's in there right now, or I turn around and come back." "That eager to visit the forest again, huh?" "Hang on," I said. "How do you know about my encounter?" The other end of the radio fell silent. "You set me up," I said. "You knew they were going to go after me with this thing in the trunk. You were trying to kill me off." "Don't be irrational. That's not what happened. You—" "Don't lie to me," I screamed, then immediately realized he couldn't hear me. Because, oh right, these are still radios, one at a time. Pushing my transmit button while he was pushing his was just preventing me from hearing him, which made me even more angry. And how dare the radio betray me too? Which only proved that yes, I indeed was being irrational, even if it was justified. I calmed and lifted my finger. "Safe, as long as you followed the rules," he continued, oblivious to my outburst. "You did follow the rules, right?" "What am I saying? You're alive, so of course you did." "Look, road dwellers just get more excited when there's live cargo. That's all. As long as you're cautious the rest of the trip, you'll be fine. But you knew I could die. We would never put you in real danger. I'm not worried for your safety, Brendan. You shouldn't be either." I wasn't, I realized. Sure, in the moment I felt fear just like anybody else. But afterwards, in the calm, I was never worried for my safety. It didn't matter what happened to me. My fury was less about the prospect of dying and more about the injustice of being set up. "Something's crying in it," I said. "Aw, it sounds like a little girl." "Well, it isn't." "Then tell me what it is." "Stop asking. You know that isn't something I'll do. You haven't slept yet, Brendan. I haven't either. Go put your head on a pillow and let's talk when we're both more calm, yeah?" I told him exactly where he could stick his head. "You aren't as valuable as you think," he growled at me. "If you continue in such an unprofessional manner, we really will find a replacement." I suspected I was exactly as valuable as I thought I was. Who else would take this job? Who else could drive the highway as fast as me? And unprofessional. That was rich coming from the guy who'd demanded I come in at 1 in the morning and shrugged off the suggestion that we help save the lives of his former employees. I was gearing up to explain all of this, you can bet in less than professional words, when a wave of fatigue hit me. I really hadn't gotten any sleep. The sun would be up in a few hours, and my body was experiencing the adrenaline-exhausted version of a hangover. Fine, I told Randall. We argue when I wake. You'll feel better down I am.
Yeah. Jeez, right? Out of sleeping, I did feel better.
And while that should have only annoyed me further, it was difficult to feel so, since I now felt infuriatingly great. So great, in fact, I didn't radio Randall back. As much as I loathed him that morning, neither he nor anyone else at dispatch was ever going to answer my questions. That much was obvious even before he'd straight up admitted it. It was also obvious I wasn't really going to go back until I'd unloaded my current haul. So what was the point? Instead, I headed inside the truck stop to grab a cup of the only decent coffee on Route 333. "You're all right then," Tiff told me in the mini diner. "Why wouldn't I be? The faceless man was prodding your rig for hours last night. I had a broom ready in case he tried to break anything. I've never seen him stay in one place like that." A chill crept through me. I never saw him. He wasn't at the windows. He was at the back of the freight, looked like he was trying to get inside. They get more excited when there's live cargo. That's what Randall had said. I sipped at my coffee. "Hey, Tiff," I started. "How could I phrase this? Have you ever figured out? Have you ever wondered, what's up with the other people on the road? The non-truckers, like the ones who work here. Like if they're real or not. Like, I forget your generation uses so many filler words." She considered my question. "There's different types of real, I suppose. We're one type, they're another." A statement which, while sounding wise and sage, didn't actually help me understand anything. Ah well. Tiff packed me food for a few days and I headed outside. Back at my rig, I slipped a pancake under the slit in the trailer door. Something snatched it from the inside. "Can you hear me?" I whispered. No response. "Do you need help?" Nothing except the near imperceptible shudder of the back door, almost as if something on the other side was pressing a hand to it, waiting to see what I decide. It was after about 6 hours of driving that I realized with dawning, crippling horror of my irreversible mistake. I'd forgotten a battery pack. Let me explain. As you all probably remember, it's prohibited to use phones on Route 333, even if you're not calling with them. Why exactly? Dunno, but it is, and I wasn't about to break any rules unnecessarily. Instead, I'd gotten in the habit of downloading content onto my old iPod Nano, which apparently qualified as a different category. I checked with management. It's fine as long as I leave it in airplane mode. I also brought a battery pack to recharge the iPod with, since the outlets in the trucks didn't always work. Such as my current truck. Which meant, you guessed it, I was now stuck on a 10-day drive without any podcasts, books, or self-chosen music. And while I did understand on a deeply personal level that there were indeed worse tragedies than lack of entertainment, this did still qualify as a tragedy. I'd stayed away from the radio before that point. A few of the stations were in fact dangerous. They'd put you in a trance or whisper secrets you wished you could unhear. But overall, they were safe. The other truckers didn't seem to fear them too much. Logically, I knew the radio was overall safe, but I'd still never been desperate enough to take the risk. Until my iPod died, that is. I flipped past a few country stations. Not my thing. Soon, though, I discovered something odd. A K-pop channel. It had probably been a few years since I'd actually listened to a car radio, but I couldn't ever remember Korean music playing on it, especially not out in the middle of nowhere like this. And the song that was playing, I didn't recognize it. I know K-pop. Stereotype me however you wish, but yes, I'm one of those white guys that watches anime and watches K-dramas and listens to Korean boy bands. K-pop Demon Hunter? Pretty good. This song, though? Not a clue. I listened for a while more. The channel was 96.2. That wasn't one of the stations I'd been warned against, was it? None of the music that came on was stuff I'd heard. They sounded like the groups I listened to, but songs I was positive didn't exist. Eventually, some of them started repeating, not in a loop like a playlist, just in the way popular songs replay every hour on the radio. And you know what? I started getting into it. Besides the pay, the perks of Route 333 had been few and far between, but this was one I could get used to. An entire playlist of music I loved that didn't exist in the real world. Sign me up. Maybe next time I'd bring a tape recorder and post this stuff online. I even started singing along. Time flew by. I didn't notice the flashing blue and white lights until the sirens came on. Randall. Nobody responded. The police car pulled in behind me. The lights flicked off. Randall, I tried again. Sorry, came a voice from the handheld radio. A woman. Gloria, I believed. I didn't interact with her as much. I was out of the room. Randall's not actually... Oh, he left a note. It says, "Tell Brendan I'm off shift." Yeah, if he wants to continue arguing, tell him one of the following responses. She pauses. The rest is quite rude, to be honest. I'm not trying to argue, I said. I just got pulled over. Do you have a flat? No. As in, a cop pulled me over. There was silence. The silence of a doctor deciding how to word that it's terminal. There's nothing I can do. How bad were you speeding? Gloria asked. That can make a big difference. Not at all. I was on cruise. I've read that section in the employee handbook. Wait, you haven't read all the employee handbook yet? Look, the important thing is he pulled me over. What do I do? A car door slammed. The highway patrol officer approached. The reason makes a difference. Gloria pushed. Yeah, I get that, but I don't know. I paused. My cargo. That's got to be why. I'm the one on the long-haul trip with the special cargo. A longer silence. Let me call Randall. The radio went dead. A knock sounded on my door. My heartbeat pittered in my chest. The employee handbook was pretty clear about this particular subject. Don't get pulled over. Don't speed or do anything that might draw the highway patrol, because there wasn't much you could do once you had. I didn't do anything, I assured myself. This isn't my fault. Not really. Then again, it wasn't really Tiff's fault she'd gotten lane-locked. Sir, a husky voice said from outside. I held my breath and popped the door. He had a tag and a uniform. He rested a hand on his hip. The mustached man was just like every other officer that had ever pulled me over, save one singular difference. His head was bent entirely back. It was as if somebody with impossible strength had grabbed his hair and yanked backwards and down. The neck was snapped and contorted. An empty tube jutted up from a break in the twisted skin, his throat. His entire face was upside down, and he stood backwards to face me. Hi, I said. Do you mind telling me what's in your trailer? Funny story. Not actually sure. Please remove yourself from the vehicle and open the back of the truck. Sorry, why did you pull me over? The officer sighed as if to say, kids these days. A puff of red mist spurted from his severed throat blowhole. Sir, you are speaking to an officer of the law. I will be investigating your vehicle. You will extricate yourself this instant, or face the full wrath of the law. It was like a child pretending at the lines a real police might say. That thought calmed me. Play acting. Fine. Two could dance to this tune. Your warrant? I asked. As an officer of the law, you're clearly well aware you need one to search private property. Yes, that's correct. I do know that. I'll retrieve mine now. He walked backwards towards his stalling car, by which I mean he walked forwards, with his upside-down eyes blinking at me. Hello, I called into my handheld. Could really use some advice right now? Nothing. If not, I'm planning to try and outrun him. Brendan, do not try to outdrive Highway Patrol. I repeat, do not attempt a chase. You will lose. Gloria's voice came through strong and clear. Finally, before I could respond, she continued. I spoke to Randall. He said none of us love the idea, but he said if you really weren't speeding. Oh, there is one thing you could try. Yeah, I said. She sounded almost embarrassed as she explained. Randall had suggested a last-ditch attempt at escape, something that had only worked a few times before, annoying the officer until he left. If I really had done nothing to get pulled over, the officer might give up if he got frustrated enough. As long as he had no legal grounds to detain me or worse, ticket me. I didn't bother asking what ticketing actually meant. Okay, and how am I supposed to annoy the officer? In my side window, I could see the cop ruffling around in the passenger of his cruiser. Randall says, again, we don't like this, but it's worked once before. You can try videotaping him with your phone. Cops hate that. The fear pulsing through me abated. The pounding distress settled. A cold understanding took over. Hey, Gloria, I said, put Randall through to me. I imagined a disagreement, a small debate. Eventually, though, his voice came through muffled and tinny. She must be holding her phone to the handheld. Brendan, he said, answer honestly this time. Did you know this haul might kill me? I did. Is there a chance I survive if I use my phone? As soon as the cop is gone, drive like there's no tomorrow. That wasn't my question, I said. I asked if there's a chance I survive. There is. And if I refuse this plan, I asked. Don't. His voice was barely audible. I'm sorry, I really am sorry we put you in this position, but you cannot let Highway Patrol get a hold of your cargo. None of the sentient road dwellers can. That isn't an option. Too much is at stake. This is bigger than you. I nodded. Yeah, if I risk breaking this rule, I have one condition. It isn't negotiable. It's a yes or no. I will only do this if you agree. Got that? It's that when I get back, you will explain to me what Route 333 is. You will tell me what I'm hauling and why it's so important. I took a breath without letting go of the transmit button. No arguing. Yes or no. A pause. Yes? There was a knock on the door. The officer was back. I set the radio down, then carefully resigned, pulled my phone from the passenger cubby and powered it on. I could explain in detail what happened next. It would be the natural thing to do, to describe how I recorded our conversation like a pestilential YouTuber until the bent-necked officer exploded and stormed away. I won't do that. To me, the whole thing was a dream. It worked. Of course it did. Randall knew it would more than he could let on, but none of that mattered. I may have survived Highway Patrol, but I wouldn't survive this next part. I watched as the black and white cruiser pulled in front of me and screamed down the highway. Smaller, smaller, gone. How does the officer see out his windshield? I wondered distantly. I set my phone in the drink holder without bothering to power it off. What I did no longer mattered. I waited, waited, waited. A line of clouds appeared over the horizon line, dark and hostile. They rolled in at an unnatural speed. Outside my windows, the wind picked up. Dust devils rose up across the desert. My end was here. Randall never would have agreed to my one condition if he thought I'd survive. I knew almost nothing about him, but I knew that much. Oh, that was the only reason I'd made our deal, to see his response. Never, for any reason, would he or the rest of management tell me the truth about the road. He needed me to avoid Highway Patrol. He couldn't allow any of the living things on Route 333 to get to my cargo, but whatever was coming for me now was in some sort of a different category. It wasn't alive. It was deadly, though. Enough he knew he wouldn't have to uphold his end of our bargain. I inhaled. I exhaled. Clouds rushed in above me, and thick drops of rust-colored liquid slid down my windshield. Blood. The end. Even now, I wasn't nervous. Surprise, surprise, I'm alive. That shouldn't come as much of a shock. How could I have posted my last entry if I'd died? But I assure you, sitting in the driver's seat, watching highway patrols screech away and the deadly dark clouds roll in, I was entirely sure I was going to die. Randall seemed to think so. Brownish red drops pattered against my windshield. They rolled down the hood and dripped from the side mirrors. The drizzle soon turned into a shower, which soon turned into a downpour. Blood rain. That's the term I wish I could use. That it had stayed a simple deluge and then passed on overhead. Instead, it got worse. The wind picked up. My rig rocked side to side. A red bolt of lightning struck a faraway mountaintop. The weather transformed from a blood rain into the thing it truly was, a meat storm. Chunks of something splattered against the windows. They exploded gore in every direction. Whole fingernails spattered the ground with the sound of hail. Loose, human-looking veins rained across the highway. I didn't bother with wipers. There was no surviving this, though I did try turning off the circulating air. Too late. By the time you smell manure on a road trip, it's always too late to close the windows. The stench of rotting flesh already filled my cab. It was the most terrible, gory thing I'd ever seen. I should have asked, who? What people had this gore been taken from? How could Route 333 possibly have caused so much death? I didn't ask this, though. Instead, I passively watched the disaster unfold, oddly at peace. Through the roar of the storm, I could make out something wailing through the back wall. The thing in the freight carrier was sobbing. This was it. I'd taken this job on Route 333 to flee my old life, but you can't run from one thing without running towards another. This was the thing I'd been hurtling towards. It would be easy, too. So easy to just sit there, recline back, and wait. My promise to help Tiff no longer mattered. My passion from the last few days flushed out of me as quickly as it had come, because in the end this was the thing I truly wanted. An out. The end. A release. I didn't just accept it. I craved it. Across the empty desert, larger body parts rained down. Legs, severed ears, fist-sized, gelatinous globs I assumed were organs that burst on impact like cans of soup. Something slammed against my windshield, a rotting arm with each finger severed at the knuckle. It tumbled away, but too late. Already cracks spider-webbed out from the point of impact to match my side window. Any second now. And then another truck appeared through the storm. The tempest bore down. The other vehicle flickered between visible and hidden through sheets of blood rain. Where had it come from? There hadn't been anybody else. The weather had turned so quickly that I should have seen them beforehand in the distance. I watched as their rig slowed to a stop just a short stretch of road away. The driver's side door flew open, and a figure threw themselves out into the storm. What happened next occurred in quick succession. There was a pop. The cab and front of their rig crumpled inwards like someone squeezing an empty soda can. Their shriveled hood burst into flames, but was put out by the rain. The enormous freight carrier collapsed inwards in much the same way, going from 3D to 2D in a millisecond. The entire vehicle groaned, teetered, and then toppled to the side. Holy! A pounding on my window. It took me a beat to register what was happening. The other driver. The person. I unrolled my window. A nightmarish, entrail-laden person looked up at me. I couldn't even tell the gender. "What are you doing?" they screamed through the wind. "Get out of here!" "What about you?" "What about me?" You don't want a ride, I yelled. I'd love a ride, but I'm not asking for one, am I? Was this a vampire and a threshold situation? Why were they acting so odd? Despite the storm and the crumpled truck and the intestines raining from the sky, I experienced a jolt of fear. Was this the real way I died from using my phone? Had the road set up this whole elaborate situation to get me to let in this stranger? I hovered my hand above the gear shift. This was like Myra all over again. This person looked harmless, but they would kill me. Oh, or eat me, or any number of terrible things if I opened the door. Wasn't that one of the first rules? Never pick up hitchhikers. It clicked. Get in, I screamed, and threw open my door. Blood and entrails splattered me. The trucker clambered up the side, scrambled over me, and collapsed in the passenger seat. Took you long enough, they spat. She, I now realized. She wasn't a hitchhiker. She'd waited for me to offer a ride before coming in, so I would know I could trust her. Maybe this was still a trick of Route 333, but I got the sense there were some rules even it couldn't break. She panted and clutched her chest, but when I just sat there, she pounded the dashboard. Go, you idiot! I did. We peeled out and careened the way she'd come. It should be lessening, she said after a minute. It already got my rig. It should be appeased. The girl spotted my phone in the cup holder. Oh my gosh, you haven't gotten rid of this yet? She unrolled the window and flicked it into the storm. Hey, that's my... But I had good enough sense to shut up. Really, Brendan, I chided myself. Priorities. We drove. Within minutes, the storm had lessened. Hefty livers and lungs lightened to spleens and eyeballs. Eventually, everything solid stopped falling. The rust-colored rain diluted until it was clear, pure water. Maybe by the time we stopped, my truck would be semi-clean. The inside, however, would not be. In the passenger seat, the girl dripped with blood. Sinuous intestinal bits dangled from her chin. A puddle of what looked like stomach bile pooled at her feet from a fleshy pouch that had gotten tangled in her hair, and warm, rotting carcass filled the air. She spat repeatedly. It's in my mouth. Ugh. Do you want a towel? There should be one. She tore the top sheet from my sleeper bed. I bit my tongue. She'd just been through something traumatic. She deserved to do whatever She ripped off the rest of the blankets. Okay, I said. I seriously just offered you a... What kind of idiot uses their phone? You owe me a truck, by the way. You're lucky I was there to take the fallout for your stupid decisions. Well, you're lucky I was there to pick you up. I shot back. I would be fine if you hadn't been there. Again, you were the one on the phone. There wasn't any other option. Oh, it was the only way to get rid of the cops. You were speeding too? I forced myself to take 3 deep breaths. Why were we arguing? Here we were, strangers covered in entrails, almost having died in the worst possible way imaginable, and already arguing about who to blame. For the record, my vote's on Randall. I wasn't even totally sure we were out of the danger zone yet. Pull over, she said. What? Why? Just pull over. I did, and she retched out the window. She wiped her mouth and recomposed herself. "'Kay, let's go." "1 sec." I leaned out my own window and puked myself. We both took another few turns. It was like we'd been holding out until this moment, then set back out, ignoring the persisting smell of death. She wrung out her hair onto my seat. "Oh, there's showers in the town, just past that ridge. I've driven this way before. I don't remember any towns nearby." "Not for you, no." Where do you think I came from? I'm lane locked. I stared at her questioningly. Don't you know anything about how the road works? She asked. We're going my speed now. Otherwise, every lane-locked driver could just get a ride back to civilization with a faster driver. I was just in a town an hour ago. The explanation made sense. Otherwise, rescuing people like Tiff would be easy. It also explained why I hadn't seen her rig before she'd appeared in the storm. She'd been in her own pocket of the road I didn't have access to yet. The further we drove, the more unfamiliar the landscape appeared. We were only about a day from civilization, but I'd never driven here. The far-off distance were familiar mountains, but they were smaller than I'd ever seen them. Hours away rather than minutes. And the cars, I realized. We were no longer the only ones on the road. Jeeps and minivans rushed occasionally from the opposite direction, filled with families and couples. The other drivers had mentioned this would happen once the road elongated enough. It would start filling with other traffic, but I hadn't spent much brain power on it. That point was still months away for me. I'd gotten so used to the eeriness of the empty road, this sudden fullness was even eerier. You're new, aren't you? The girl asked. This is all still fresh to you. It is. I'm Autumn, by the way. Brendan. Well, Brendan, you're officially the first real person I've talked to this year. And you've done a splendid job reaffirming my hopes. You're the last person I talked to this year. I really am sorry about your truck. Does Randall know about you? I paused. He probably thinks I'm dead by now. Hand me the radio, would you? Radio? What rad... Autumn felt under her leg in the pool of liquid. She pulled out the dripping handheld and attempted switching it on. Bad news, The town was quaint. I wondered if the variety of town was different for lane-locked individuals, a consolation prize of sorts, or if we'd just gotten lucky. There was a main street with hanging flowers from every light post and a farmer's market at a nearby park full of running children. Best of all, though, the truck stop showers. After my experience at Tiff's Diner, I'd resolved never to shower on the road again. After a day like today, though, despite what the employee handbook says, some rules are meant to be broken. I spent a whole hour scrubbing effluvia and bits of rotted skin from my nails and hair. Even when I was done, I could smell dying carcass, but I spritzed myself with gas station air conditioner and called it good. Autumn had used the rest of my clothes on our drive to wipe herself down, so I also bought an XL I Heart Beer shirt. I'm a medium, for the record. It was the only one left. A few minutes later, Autumn emerged from the shower rooms as well. You're staring, she said. I was. You look different. Than when I was covered in literal human secretions? Yeah. Oh, I do. She gave me the once-over. You look about the same. Then she stalked off imperiously before I could retort. What I hadn't said, though, the real reason I was staring, was this. Autumn looked undeniably like Myra. I don't point that out to say I was attracted to her. I can already imagine the comment section. Please just don't. But it caught me off guard to be reminded of Myra like that. I'd finally stopped thinking about my ex-girlfriend, and here she was, on the road for the second time. Route 3. 3-3 was mocking me. I spent hours scrubbing out my cab. By evening, it looked mainly clean, but the smell was baked into the seats. Absolutely wonderful. It wasn't like I had 8 more days of my trip ahead of me. Autumn didn't offer to help, which was pretty understandable. I'd gotten her truck destroyed, and now what? I was just going to abandon her in this town without transportation. She did, however, show up once evening was set and lean against the side of the trailer. She couldn't be much older than me, maybe even younger. "There's a motel just down the street," she said. "Not the coziest place, but you don't have to go down any side streets, so it's allowed. I stayed there all this week. It's cleaner than your sleeper, and not all towns are as docile at night as during the day." "How long have you been stuck out here?" I asked. Her expression darkened. "Take another shower. You reek worse than before." She marched away before I could respond. This was the second time she'd done that. I paused at the back of the freight before following after her. "Sorry about today," I whispered. "I'm sure you didn't ask to get caught in the meat storm. I suspect you didn't ask to be stuck in a trailer either." The thing said nothing. I leaned closer. "Do you want to come out?" It merely sniffled. That night was the best sleep I'd gotten on the road. Under any other circumstance, I would have been stressed beyond belief. Could the faceless man get into motel rooms? What about highway patrol? There was nothing in the employee handbook against sleeping outside of our vehicles, but I'd escaped most of my experiences here by merely hiding in the cab. Sleeping outside of it felt somehow wrong. I gave myself permission to relax. Autumn didn't seem concerned, and I'd been entirely ready to die earlier. Why should I freak out now? In the morning, I experienced something I hadn't for months, feeling rested. I grabbed an apple from the open breakfast area, and headed outside for a walk around the parking lot. The morning sun colored the clouds pink and orange. It's always been fascinating to me. The fact that in photos, sunsets and sunrises look nearly identical. The only difference is the direction. "Brendan!" I whirled. Randall waved at me from an alley just beyond the parking lot. His face was a mask of relief and fatigue. I blinked. "You're okay," he said. "We weren't sure after you stopped responding. We thought, but we weren't sure. I came straight here. I haven't slept all night." I blinked again. He pulled out a radio. "Gloria, we found him. He's all right. He ended up in Autumn's town. Brendan, come here. Say hi, so she knows you're okay." I tilted my head. I walked forward to the lip of the side street. "I'm good," I said. "We survived." "She can't hear you." "Here." He offered the radio in one hand. I didn't walk forward. "Brendan, take it." "Lucky you found me," I said. "Tell me about it." "None of the other truckers knew where you'd ended up. They told me not to come, but I had to search, and this seemed like the most likely area." "You're really fine. The cargo's okay." "Cargo's fine. Autumn's truck got obliterated, though. You and I can go back in yours. She can take my car. Here, I'll show you." Randall gestured for me to follow him down the alley. I stayed put. "What is it?" I asked. "Sorry?" "The thing in my trunk, the living thing. Why do you all want it so badly?" "I'm not sure what you're—" "Oh, please, that Myra clone was more convincing than your sorry self. I've made mistakes before, but I'm not an absolute idiot." For a beat, just one, Randall looked offended. Then his expression dropped. He sneered in a cold, loathing fashion I'd never seen with the real Randall. "It doesn't belong to you, Stone Dweller." "No, but I don't think my cargo belongs to you either. At least I can take it where I want. That's right, isn't it? You can't come here onto the main road." It scowled without answering. "Try better next time. We will devour you." "Maybe," I said, "but not yet." I pulled an Autumn and strolled away before it could reply. She found me behind my trailer. I don't know how she knew to look for me there or why she was even looking for me. But when autumn found me, that's where I was. I contemplated the blood-splattered cargo doors. "Oh, don't," she told me. "Don't what?" "You're a terrible liar. I know what you're thinking about doing, but it's not worth it. You know what's inside?" She shoved her hands in a set of baggy pockets. "Management sucks. I knew this Randall you keep talking about. He's the worst. He really is. But that doesn't mean whatever's in there isn't dangerous. Terrible people can still be in charge of good causes." "What if we're the ones hurting it?" I asked. "What if I'm the only one that can help it? Savior complex much?" "That's not. When you let me into your truck, you were just sitting there. It looked like you were just waiting for the end. Just focus on keeping yourself alive for now, all right?" How did I explain that that was the issue? That when there was another person or thing that needed me, I could put my foot on the pedal and drive. But when it was just me, alone, with nobody, I was about to voice this, but before I could, Autumn shrugged, and you guessed it, strolled away. That would get annoying quick. I didn't open the trunk, not that day, but I did stop by it before I headed out to rest my hand on the cool metal. "I'll protect you," I whispered. "Wherever we're going, I promise you'll at least make it." The next time there was a storm, I would drive. Autumn came to wish me goodbye before I left, by which I mean she came to lecture me one final time. "Don't die," she said. "I'm not going to die. I'm not finished. Don't die. Then you won't be able to give me your truck on the return." "Yeah, that's not happening either." "Autumn. Oh, I can't even come back to this town without you in the car." "I'm not finished, and not true. Now that you've been once, you can always come back. It's been added to your version of Route 333, which also unfortunately means your drive will be a bit longer." "That's fine. Wasn't apologizing. This is all your fault and you owe me." She grew suddenly serious. "You told me you're going past the 3-day mark, which sounds like it might already be farther than normal given how quickly you drive. Just be careful. Things can get odd, more than normal. Try to stay in your truck as much as you can, and don't die. It almost sounds like you don't hate me nearly as much as you profess to. You're the only one that knows where I am now. Why can't you hijack one of the cars in town?" She shuddered. "Tried that once. Will not be repeating." I opened my mouth, closed it, then asked the question she'd refused to answer yesterday. "How long have you been lane-locked?" She glared at me. "A lot of us give up when we get trapped, especially the older ones. I'm young, though. It doesn't matter how long I've been here or how long it takes to escape. I'm not dying here." A long time, then. Neither of us acknowledged the obvious truth. Autumn was further out than any other trucker. Much further. Tiff was mere hours from the end of Route 333. But it would still be a decade or more for her to escape. Autumn, though, this far away. She may be young now, but she wouldn't exit until her 50s or 60s, if at all. It was all so unfair. We were both here in the same spot, but she was trapped, while I could be in the real world in less than a day. That spark there. Her stubborn determination. I was struck again with how much she looked like Myra. Here was somebody who'd been driving alone for multiple years, and she still managed to hold her chin up. "Oh, and Brendan," she said, "this isn't in the employee handbook, but hold your breath if you go through any tunnels." With that, she patted the side of my rig and marched away. Typical. 3 days. 3 more days until my final destination. With everything that had happened the last 40-some-odd hours, it felt like weeks had gone by, but I was barely 2 days into my trip, less than that. With the forest dwellers, the meat storm, and autumn, I was hours off schedule. I'd be putting in a positively illegal number of hours to make it up. It wasn't that I thought some specific terrible thing would happen if I was late. It was just that the more time I spent with this particular cargo, the more chances some unknown terrible thing had to occur. I took Autumn's advice and stayed mostly in my truck. When I needed fuel, I stopped only at empty gas stations. I triple-checked the area was deserted before hopping out, and when it was time to sleep, I would stuff paper tissues into my nostrils for the smell. Who cared about the weather? There was no way I was leaving the windows open. Sure enough, the first night without Autumn, the faceless man was sniffing at my window. I blared my horn until he scampered away. The next day, I chanced a food run to a rundown general store along the main road. All within minutes, the employees went from friendly to frowning. Soon, they were collecting near the front doors with brooms, looking less and less human by the second. I slipped out the delivery door with my food basket without paying. Gas station employees started staring at me just a bit too long. At night, the highway would fill with thick, blinding mist. Heavy clouds seemed to sit always on the horizon, as if waiting for any excuse to descend. And the air, how to describe it? There was an oppressiveness. The fuzzy, weighted feeling just before a storm, but constant. You'll be fine, I reassured myself. As long as you stay in your truck, you're safe. The wailing was louder now. The childlike thing in the trailer would openly weep as I drove. Only when I pulled off and walked to the back would it stop, as if the thing was embarrassed to be caught. It was the afternoon of day 4 when I officially passed the furthest point I'd ever gone, an abandoned shopping mall. There'd never been much logic behind where dispatch sent us to drop off our trailers. Sometimes it was at empty warehouses, sometimes vacant grocery stores. The only requirement was that these drop-off points all had some sort of a loading dock, but apart from that, they were random. Abandoned, usually. I didn't know of any trucker who'd ever picked a trailer up. I slowed as I approached the pullout for the mall. Past this point was uncharted territory, a vast expanse of unknown. From what I'd gathered from Deidre and Vikram and the other drivers, almost none of them had been past this point either. I stepped on the gas. The eternal desert gave way to canyon. A fragile guardrail rose up to protect my multi-ton vehicle from sheer cliffs, and the straight road began twisting. Far below, a blackish river wound its way through meadows and thickets of birch trees. The road was empty. It had always been empty. Without Autumn, I was again the only vehicle on the road. Not that it stopped me from clenching my stomach around curves, but it was more than that. There were no birds. The very wind had given way to flat, dead air. When I stopped for a bathroom break on the side of the road, the stillness was maddening. "You all good?" I asked the trailer on one of these breaks. I headed back to the cab without waiting. I'd given up hoping that the thing would... A mutter. I scrambled back over and pressed my ear to the trailer. Watching. I stayed still. The thing had spoken. I'd suspected it could understand me before, but I hadn't been sure. Honestly, maybe it still couldn't, in the way parrots don't understand the human words they say. But this somehow felt intentional. "You're watching me?" I asked. Nothing. I waited some more. There were no more words, no more sobbing, not even audible breathing. Eventually, I started back on my way. What did it mean? What was it watching? Me? Or was it merely annoyed by my constant checkups? It wanted me to stop watching it. Could that be it? Then another thought, a cold one. What if I was misunderstanding entirely? I shuddered. A desire overwhelmed me to look up through the windshield above me. At the infinite patient sky. I didn't. Instead, I did what any 20-something-year-old would do while their understanding of cosmic existence was being deconstructed and made anew. I switched on the radio. At least there would always be K-pop. The longer I drove, the more I noticed odd details. The leaves on trees looked almost correct, but if you slowed and focused, they weren't always connected to the branch. They would dangle there suspended by nothing. On stretches of desert, tumbleweeds would roll across the road. There was still no wind. They would bounce in multiple directions at the same time, as if they weren't quite sure which way they were supposed to go, only that they should go somewhere. And the canyon river. If you squinted, it looked like a river, but when you examined it, there was no movement of water. It just sat there, entirely flat, despite the downward slope of the terrain. Sometimes I would wind around a circular hill, far past the point I should have met up with road I'd already come down, except I never would. It just kept going in a loop. New scenery, new views, around the same limited circle, until finally the road would realize, I've gone too long, haven't I? It would straighten out onto a brand new stretch of highway. The best comparison would be AI art. The first time you glance over it, nothing seems amiss. It's only when you study it that you notice six-fingered hands and strings of letters that aren't quite words. It's the impression of an image more than anything, like a waking dream. The further I drove from the real world, the less real things seemed to be. Shim Route 333 had the general idea of how physics worked, but kept forgetting the specifics. Or perhaps it merely didn't care. Why should it? Humans were never meant to be here, or especially get this far. What if I lane locked right now? The thought bubbled up from nowhere. I shoved it down. Well, tried to. I cranked up the music and sang along again. Tried to. I didn't actually know the words. What if I do, though? Autumn still had a chance. Her trip would take decades, but here, nearly 4 days away from the start of the road, the drive back would be hundreds of years. I'd be stuck here in this strange, not reality. I turned the music up louder. Why didn't I recognize this song? After 4 days of station 96.2, I'd memorized most of the songs by now, but this one, it wasn't even K-pop. I went to switch it off. My hand didn't move. What the? Again, I tried, but my grip on the steering wheel only tightened. I glanced down at the car radio and... Oh. Oh no. The digital display no longer showed station 96.2. Somehow, a slip of my hand or a bump in the road, the station had switched to 96.5. One of the forbidden stations. I let out a stream of profanity. At least my mouth still functioned correctly. I tried shifting my foot to the brake. It only pushed down on the gas harder. There was a volume dial on the steering wheel. If I could only raise my thumb and press down. Impossible, though. My limbs had ceased to function. My legs and hands, anything besides my face, really, were no longer my own. Far in the distance, a curve in the road. The needle on my speedometer continued to rise. If I couldn't stop, I'd hurl over the edge, off the cliff, haul into the canyon. Already the crunch of metal rang in my ears. A snap. Blackness. The guardrail ahead was already broken and missing. The road wanted nothing between me and the inevitable fall. The song on the radio would end. That was how I escaped. It would end any second, and in the pause, I would punch the power button and seize control. It seemed so obvious. I'd always gotten lucky with these things. The creatures always stopped a second before they found me. I always woke up and saw the faceless man just before he could unlock my door. Another driver appeared as sacrifice, right when the meat storm was preparing to crush me. I would get lucky now, too. Any moment, the song would end. I waited. It didn't. I expected numb resignation like had happened a few days previous. I'd given up so easily then. But what filled me now was scalding and sharp. None of this was fair. Why couldn't I both want to live and be allowed to? Before, whenever I'd wished to stop existing, something had always pulled me back. But now, when I was finally finding reasons to continue on. Something was going to kill me anyways. Tiff needed me. Autumn did too, and Al, and the thing in the trailer had already been through so much this trip. It's ironic, I thought as the edge approached, how the things we would die for are the same things that make us afraid of dying. The injustice of it all bubbled up into my throat. It exploded out my mouth. I was screaming without intentionally choosing to. My throat burned, but I roared anyway, at the radio, the road, the universe, anything and all of it, everything and nothing. I screamed until it consumed me. It drowned out the world, overtook my vision, eliminated all sound. I slammed off the radio. The brakes screeched. The back of the truck whipped back and forth. The entire rig came to a stop a few meters short of the edge. For a good 5 minutes, I gripped the wheel with my foot planted firmly on the brake, doing nothing but try to control my breathing in shocked silence. It was only when I got out and peered over the edge that I realized why the guardrail in that particular section had already been torn away. A twisted freight container lay on its side hundreds of feet below. The cab lay a ways off, upside down and equally bent. Later, I used a spare ice scraper to gouge the stereo into pieces. Fun while it lasted. Oh, I drove the final day in silence. No cops pulled me over. No gas station attendants approached me with too wide smiles. Even the dark clouds on the horizon dissipated. It was like Route 333 had fired every last bullet at me, and now it could merely scowl from a distance, holding its empty pistol. I let my eyes glaze over the abnormalities of ever-degrading reality, and drove. Weeks ago, so much silence might have unpicked the threads of my sanity. It was why I always made sure to have music downloaded. Thoughts were always worse when there was nothing loud to chase them out. Now, though, with the sobbing thing in the trailer and Autumn trapped in a town only I could access, my mind was singular. I would get my cargo to its destination. I would keep it safe. When I did actually reach the drop-off point, I didn't feel relief, only a determination to finish the job. I'd driven up a mountain for hours, watching for the abandoned gas station Randall had described to me. Right when I expected to crest the summit, the road leveled out. The landscape in front of me stretched out to open, lush forest. Impossible. We should be at a peak. I should be gazing at miles of valley below. Laws of nature were barely a consideration anymore. All I cared about was the abandoned gas station at the side of the road. Randall's instructions were clear. I might loathe him, but even Autumn seemed to think I should follow his directions. I would leave the trailer at the loading bay just like always, turn around and drive home. Oh, it took me some minutes to unhook the trailer, but eventually it detached. I set my hand on the back doors one final time. We made it. You'll be safe here. Things will stop trying to capture you now. A child's voice sobbed in response. The thing usually stopped when I approached, but it cried openly now, as if it understood this was our final goodbye. How could I just leave it? Would something come to collect it? Who was responsible to keep it safe now? I fingered the lock. I didn't even have to look. I could simply unlock it so it had a way to get out once I was gone. If it had begged me, I never would have considered this. But it hadn't. Not once. It wasn't like hitchhikers begging for a ride. The thing had resigned itself to its situation like Tiff, like I had in the past. Be safe, I whispered. Before I could change my mind, I drove away. No more breaking rules, no more risks, and no looking back, I told myself. My own rule. It would only make things harder. I neared the curve that would carry me back to the mountain switchbacks. The ground shook. Around me, trees quavered. In my rear view, the abandoned gas station tilted. The earth around it opened up like the yawning maw of a beast, and my trailer teetered on the edge. No! There was no time to turn the rig back around. I leapt out and sprinted the way I'd come. I reached the opening chasm just as the freight container wavered, then pitched forward into the darkness. Screaming, a child's screeches rose from the container as it tumbled downwards. The earth snapped closed with the sickening crunch of metal. Silence. You've all just spent the last few weeks reading about the first half of my 10-day trip. You're probably all geared up for my adventures on the return. You're excited for the details of more deadly situations in which I narrowly escape. There was none of that. I drove in silence. I spoke to no one. I didn't stop to shower, and I ate only what I could grab from gas stations. When I passed through Autumn's town, I kept driving. When I drove past Tiff's diner, I didn't stop. I took the occasional nap and drove through the nights. Nothing and no one attempted to stop me, not even the forest dwellers. For the first time, there was no supernatural stalling in the redwood section. They knew, like everything else, something terrible would befall them should they try to slow me down. When I finally pulled into the truck yard near nightfall, my resolve didn't falter. I parked, downed an energy drink, then strode through the dispatch center into Randall's office. His eyes bugged out from his skull. "Brendan, you're okay." Calmly, I locked the door behind me. "What? How? Nobody's spoken to you in over a week. We thought you'd—" I slammed my foot into his chest. He and his chair crashed to the floor. I fell on him, pinned him down, and wrapped my hand around his mouth, pressing down with pounds of force. Wide, fearful eyes stared up. For once, they weren't mine. "You're right," I said. "We haven't spoken in so long. Let's have a chat, shall we?"